Okay, so in this lesson, I'm going to walk you through your module system here inside of Maya. And if we take a look here in the top left, you see something that says animation. Now, it's also either going to say animation, polygons, surfaces, dynamics, rendering, and then dynamics, and so on. Maya 2012 and Maya 2013 will be a little different because Maya 2013 I think also has N here as well. Um, and also probably a couple other extra ones. My 2012 is also probably a little bit different, but as long as you understand why these say what they say, you should be okay. So this is your module system, and it sort of works in conjunction to what is actually inside of your shelf. So let's go ahead here, and I'm just going to go ahead and switch to my Polygon shelf and also my Polygon module. You can also change this simply by hitting between F2 and I think F7 on your keyboard or F6 on your keyboard inside of Maya 2011. 2012 and 2013 are a little bit different, whereas you can hit F7 and probably I think F8 and F9 inside of Maya 2013. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but it all pertains specifically to your shelf and also your menu bar up here at the top. So let's go ahead and change this to polygons, which would be F3 on your keyboard. So I'm going to hit F2 there, and you can see where it's going to change to animation. And if I hit F3, it's going to bring up my polygons module. Now, when we change this, you also see that the menu bar here is also going to change. So let's go ahead and change this once again to animation, and you can see where this is going to change. So if we go ahead and switch back to polygons, you can see where it sort of changes from, say, select all the way over to help. And these all pertain to and sort of contain what's also on your shelf here. So let's go ahead and switch back to polygons here. And I'm not going to walk you through exactly what every single tool does inside of Maya in these shelf buttons or in these menu buttons, and that's because there are so many tools that it would take me probably 3 weeks to explain in depth what every single tool actually does inside of Maya. So as long as we get a general understanding and sort of introduction to them, we'll simply know where to find those tools and how to use those tools. So like I said, everything that's on your shelves, whether it be your polygon shelf, your rendering shelf, your animation shelf, all the tools that are basically here can be found within inside your corresponding module and menu system. So let's take a look here at your polygon sphere here, your polygon cube. These are basically your primitive shapes, and these primitive shapes aren't necessarily going to be inside the Maya modeling system menu. These are all pertained with inside your create button here. Okay, so these would be your Nurbs primitives, which obviously are a little bit different in terms of polygons and Nurbs. These come out more smooth rather than being a polygon, which is typically sort of faceted and hard edged. But if you understand how the polygon system works, you can go ahead and smooth that at render time, and you're not necessarily going to have any errors. Which you can also take a look here at your Polygon primitives, and this is going to be pretty much the same corresponding information that's, let me go ahead and just move this down here, which is going to be right here. So all of your primitives shapes, whether it be for your Nurbs and your surfaces, are also all going to be contained with under your create menu. But you're also going to be able to create lights, cameras. CV curve tool is you're going to be able to draw curves inside of your perspective, side, top, whatever view. Bezier curve tool, and you can see where you're also going to be able to create text. You can bring in Adobe Illustrator objects. So if you use Adobe Illustrator, which is sort of like I want to say like a curve generation system and program, it's similar to Photoshop, but since this isn't an Adobe Illustrator tutorial, I'm not going to go ahead and cover that. Your locator, which contains and pertains to animation, It can also be found on your animation shelf here. So like I said, everything that's pretty much on these shelves, whether it be for polygons, animation, lighting, and rendering, they're all going to be contained within inside the menu system too. So if we go ahead and say I want to switch to something else, whether it be the animation menu, you can go ahead and hit F2, which is just the short keyboard shortcut for that. F3. If you hit F1, it's okay. It's just going to simply take you to an online documentation system for Maya, whether whether you're using Maya 2011. So if you're in, like I am, inside of Maya 2011, and I hit F1, it's going to bring up that Maya online documentation system for Maya 2011. If you're inside of Maya 2012, it's going to do the same. 2013, and so on. You obviously see here a couple extra shelves that I've added, and I've just simply brought back my own personal preferences. Okay, and there's nothing to worry about here. Let's go ahead here and take a look at our display. This is going to basically pertain to how your objects are perceived in Maya and displayed inside of Maya. And I'm going to go ahead here and create a simple polygon sphere here, and I'll just go ahead and drag it out, hit 5 on my keyboard to shade the model. But now you don't see an actual wireframe here. To bring up the wireframe of the object, you can either come over here to shading and just hit where you can see like the keyboard shortcut 4, which is just going to give you a wireframe of your object. So let's go ahead and turn this off. Smooth shade, which is just going to give you a gray object. Smooth shade selected items, okay, which if you have a selected one selected, you can go ahead and do that. Flat shade, which will just give you like the unsmooth model. Flat shade selected items, so if you have something selected again. Okay, bounding box, which is sort of like a very low res proxy object, or point, which is, I don't know if you can really see that, but it's like pink points that's going to sort of outline what is your polygon sphere, where the vertices are placed on your polygon sphere. So let's just go back here to wireframe, turn 5 on, and I want to go ahead and turn the wireframe for this on as well. So I'm just hitting this bar, and if you simply just say drag your mouse button up and just leave it there for a second, it's going to tell you exactly what that tool does. Okay, so let's go ahead here to the next one, and it says smooth shade all. So you can see where if you just click it or leave your mouse button there, it's going to tell you exactly what that tool does. So let's go ahead here and turn on our wireframe. This button here is basically going to be your hardwired or your hard textured object. So it's sort of works in conjunction with 6 on your keyboard, and since we don't necessarily have a texture on this, we aren't going to see that. But the display button here is going to allow you to turn off your grid or turn back on your grid. And if you go ahead and hit this little squared box, it's also going to bring you up to what is going to be able to edit the size of your grid or the color of your grid. Okay, and you can simply just work through these and sort of try to figure out exactly which each of these do. But generally, I mean, if you wanted to change the color of your grids and lines and numbers, you can simply just go ahead and do that by just grabbing the simple slider here and just changing it. Your subdivision lines, which would pertain to a subdivision model, whether it be a surface object, Nurbs patch, or whatever, you can simply go ahead and change the color for that as well. Your UI elements are going to contain things like your status line, which you can see turns off if you go ahead and uncheck that, which would be the top line here. And these things contain and pertain to being able to like select certain types of whether it be vertices, polygons, and things like that. You can simply just, like I said, take your mouse, just drag it up here, leave it there. It's going to tell you what it's going to do. So if you say turn that lock on, it's going to lock your selection, and you can't select anything else. So we'll go ahead and turn that off there. Let's come down here and just turn these all back on here. We'll take a look at this channel box here in a minute. Your hide is basically going to allow you to hide current selection or basically frame in on one item in your scene. Show is going to allow you to show things like extra geometry, your hair systems, lights and whatnot. It's going to allow you to be able to turn them on and off. Your wireframe color. So let's say, hey, I want to change it to like a pink. You can simply go ahead and do that. Okay. If we can go ahead here to object. Okay. Your object display is going to allow you to template objects. Okay, so you can see where it sort of changes that type of display there. Okay, so let's go ahead and come back here to the outliner, and I'll just simply change it. And you can also see where it changes that in the outliner as well. I want to go ahead and untemplate that. Okay, I actually have to go into the attribute editor to go ahead and find it. I'm not going to go ahead and do that right now. Your transform display is going to allow you to basically edit the display of your transforming object, and then you can see here where you can also change displays for things like your polygons, your Nurbs, your subdivision surfaces, your animation animation items, whether it be like it says here, like lattice points, lattice shapes, which would also pertain to what's inside of your deformation shelf or rendering. You're going to be able to turn your paint effects, which are going to be things that are contained in your paint effects menu. I'm not 100% sure if I'll go into the depth for what is actually inside of your paint effects menu, but as long as you know where to find them, you can then simply go ahead and use them. Okay, so let's come up here and let's take a look at what's under our window button here. Now, let me see if I can go. Okay, I got that selected. And I'm just going to open up my outline here, and I'm going to go ahead and delete my polygon sphere here, just so that we don't have anything in our scene, because we don't necessarily need it here. Your general editors. These are going to be things like your component editor, what's going to help in skinning models and actually rigging. Your attribute spreadsheet, which is it's fairly complex. Your connection editor, which is going to allow you to basically edit the connections between one object and another. Your visor, which pertains to, say, things like rendering and your paint effects. Okay, your display layer editor, your asset editor, your namespace editor, or things like where you can change namespaces of objects. Blind data editor. I think, like I said, these are probably a little bit complex in terms of being introduced to Maya. So let's come down here and say, like, your script editor is going to allow you to go ahead and script inside of Maya here, as you can see here. So you can also see where it's going to, if I just type inside of there, it's also going to highlight and color these objects. Okay, so you sort of have a, I spelt that wrong. You have what is a syntax highlighted coding editor inside of Maya. Now, you can either code inside of Mel or code with Python. Python is definitely going to be a more complex language than Mel is. I'm definitely not going to, say be scripting here for you guys, because that's something it's pretty complex, especially if you say want to do something specific inside of Maya. You're going to be able to do that with Mel or with Python. Let's go ahead and take a look at our rendering editors here. This is going to allow us to edit or change or go ahead and texture our models. So our render view would basically be what is going to be rendered out, or what you want to go ahead and render. Your render settings are going to pertain to, say, being able to change settings for whenever you want to render. If you want higher quality renders, lower quality renders, if you want to change the anti-aliasing of your renders and so on. We're not going to go ahead and go into this now because we're going to be working with a project later on down the road, and it'll just make it easier for me to go ahead and explain to you what's going on here later on down the tutorial. Your Hypershade, let's go ahead and click this. It's going to bring up what is basically just a color system inside of Maya and how you're going to go ahead and actually texture your models. Now, the Hypershade, I mean, it may look complex, but in reality, it's not necessarily that difficult. Yes, there are a lot of nodes inside of here, but a lot of these just simply pertain to certain aspects of your geometry, whether it be coloring your models, adding bump maps to your models, specular maps, and so on, or adding specific effects to your models. You can simply do this through the Hypershade. But I just want to give you a sort of introduction here to the Hypershade. Everything that's on the left pertains to a certain type. So if you want to say, hey, add a 3D texture, you can just simply select 3D texture, and then this would contain all of the 3D textures that actually Maya has, or types of displacements, or your 2D textures. Or say you wanted to add a glow to your object, you can simply use the optical FX, or things like image planes and stuff like that. Okay. Now at the top here would be just sort of ways of how you can go ahead and pertain your workspace to, or show your workspace. So, this first one would be just the top part of your workspace. That would be just the bottom of your workspace, and you can see where it's the outline here, or you want to show both tabs. And things like this menu system here, it's also going to show you like the asset nodes, your projects, your bake sets, your shading groups, your cameras that are in your scene, lights that are in your scene, textures that are in your scene, utilities that are in your scene, materials that are in your scene. And these are also called shaders, okay, as you can see here. These two buttons here will allow you to show the previous graph or show the next graph. So let's go ahead and select the model here, and let's go ahead and select this middle one. And these are basically going to show you the input and the output connections of your shaders. Okay. These top buttons here, which are your menu buttons as well, are going to allow you to basically bake out textures and whatnot. And there, like I said, there's a lot of information that's actually inside of here. Okay, and so if you want to just say go through by yourself, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's just go ahead and close this because it's going to be easier to basically walk you through the Hypershade whenever we start to texture our model. But like I said, these are all going to contain what are your rendering editors, or what's going to pertain to what works in correlation to what is going to be rendered. Okay, so let's come down here to the animation editors, and as you can see here now that this is going to contain things like your graph editor, which is going to help in animation, your tracks editor, dope sheet, your blend shapes, which are going to work. Say if you have blend shapes on your model, it's going to basically just bring up another window which would contain all of your blend shapes for your model, which is going to be a slider system. Your expression editor, which is so like I said, it's complex. I mean, the expression editor is going to allow you to add expressions to certain objects in your scene. So if you want one object to act differently than another object, it's basically going to allow you to do that, and it works sort of in conjunction with MelScript. It sort of works with MelScript and works like MelScript, so it's not necessarily going to be a full MelScripting thing. It's just basically going to be an expression. Your relationship editor, let me go ahead and close this window here, are going to be things, as you can see here, like deformer sets, which are going to also work in conjunction with rendering. Partitions, which are, they all work in conjunction with relationships. with other items. So whether it's going to be one item working in conjunction with one item, or a light that you want to turn off, or only use that light to light a specific item, or a light that's only going to light something else, you can turn the relationship from that light to another object on or off, and it's not going to work with the rest of the scene. But like I said, these are fairly complex for introductions to Maya as well. Your settings and preferences here are really what you should understand. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this. Preferences. This is going to be how you can go ahead and save things that are sort of like your undos and your UI elements. Okay, so let's just go ahead and try to maximize this a little bit so we can go ahead and take a look here. Your interface, which is the main thing. So when you first open Maya, say you wanted to go ahead and have your dynamics menu. Whenever you first open Maya, this is what would come up. So it would be your dynamics menu that would come up. Okay, but since I'm pretty much a modeler, I tend to use just simply my Polygon menu to come up. Your UI elements are things like your visible UI elements, like your status line, your shelf, your time slider, your range slider. So you can turn these on and off as well here. You can see where the time slider is going to turn on there. And simply, since I don't use these a lot, I just simply turn them off. Your help line, which is down there at the bottom. Your toolbox, which is on the left there. Okay. The editors in your main window here. And let me go ahead and simply just try to move some of these out of the way here so we can see what this is going to do. Okay, you can go ahead and show what's going to be on here on the left, which is your channel box. Okay, your attribute editor, which would be the shortcut Control A with something selected. Your tool settings, which are pertaining to things like your move tool, your rotate tool, your scale tool, and so on. You can either show that or not show that permanently. Your control box or your channel box and your letter editor, which are over here on the right hand side. So if we go ahead and turn that off, that's going to turn off. Show layer editor with channel box. So if you turn that off, you'll still get the channel box or the layer editor, but you won't get the channel box. So if we turn that back on, we not only have the channel box and the layer editor. Your panel configurations, which are how your panels are laid out inside of Maya. Let's come down here to our view cube here, which pertains to this and is basically going to allow you to rotate around your object. But since we have this is our perspective, you can simply just go back to home and still keep that moving. Our help, which is basically F1 on your keyboard, or you can change it to any language that you want, and Maya is going to simply update that and say you'll get your help in Japanese or something else. And so it's Maya, like I said, Maya is very smart in terms of being able to display stuff like that. So if you want your English or your help in Japanese, go ahead, be my guest and have your help in Japanese, but I think I'll keep my help in English. Your display, which is going to allow you to say set your max text to resolution and stuff like that. And if you just simply read the names here, you're simply going to understand exactly what it does. It's not necessarily that complex to understand exactly what all of these do. Kinematics is basically for your animation. Obviously you have an animation system there. Your manipulators, which are going to pertain to things like your manipulator tools, like your move, your scale, and stuff like that. You're going to be able to change the size of it, but you can simply also change the size here with W here, your plus and minus on your keyboard, and you can see where it's going to change the manipulator size here. Okay, so let's come up back here and bring this up here. Your Nurbs are going to contain and pertain to your Nurbs and how they're displayed. Same with polygons here. Same with your subdivisions. You can either see it as numbers or points. And the settings here are really what's important. So when Maya first opens, you're modeling everything inside a centimeter axis. I think Mac's world coordinate system is maybe a little different here than what Maya is, but typically your y-axis is going to be your up axis, so it's going to be up and down for your y, left and right for your x, and front to back with your z-axis. And you should really understand that, because that's going to help you work correctly later on down the road. Your animation here is basically going to pertain how to your animation is displayed. And I'm just going to move these off the screen here so I can have a little bit more room. Okay, your assets are basically going to be how your assets are going to work inside of Maya. Same with your cameras, your dynamics, your files and projects, which if you want to set a default project directory, you can go ahead and simply do that here, or always start in a certain project. So your default projects directory is in your My Documents on your computer, but if you want to say start it at a certain project that you're currently working on, you can simply just click the folder here and set that. Your recent history size is works in conjunction with the file that you're currently working on, so you can set anywhere from whatever here. Your autosave, you can simply just enable that, and it's going to autosave every certain amount of time. So whether it would be 10-minute intervals, 5-minute intervals, and things like that. Your Maya ASCII file compression mode is going to contain if you're going to be using the Maya ASCII file, which is the .ma file association. Your display layers are going to work in conjunction with whether you want them by number or by name. Your render layers are over here at the bottom. Okay. File dialogs, which you can either have as your operating system native, so this depends on whatever operating system that you're using, or you want to use the My Default, which I tend to use. And if we take a look here at the edit, you can always the edit button, you can always revert to a saved configuration or the default Maya or Autodesk system. Okay. Help, obviously you can get your help on preferences here. Modeling is basically anything that's going to pertain to modeling. Same with rendering. How you want to select, how your selection is. So as you can see here, if I hit face mode, you can see where we can select faces, which is basically just the center of that face. But let's say I wanted to select the entire face. Okay, so if I go ahead and change that, you can see where it's going to allow me to basically just select the entire face there. Okay, I don't have to specifically have it in the center of that face to go ahead and select it there. Your priority is what is basically going to be your priority here. Okay, and I typically don't change this and haven't changed it, and I simply don't. You can change your preset too, whether it be a custom on your animation, whatever. Snapping is pertaining to things like if you're, let's go ahead and select the vertice here. You want to snap to the grid, so let's just select one, and I'm holding down V here, and it's just going to allow me to either select and snap to vertices on the model, or if I hold X, it's going to allow me to go ahead and snap to the grid here. Okay. Your sound is, Maya can also bring in sounds, and you can play those sounds inside of Maya, so you can basically edit that as well. Your time slider, which is going to be down here in the bottom, which I've turned off, is going to allow you to edit the way it's displayed. Undo is very important. Pretty much you either have a set number, so if you turn the undo off, you're not going to basically have any undo. Turn it back on, you will have undo. You can either have a finite number, so say like 999, that's all the undos you're going to be able to do, or 5, you would only be able to do 5 undos, so pressing Z on your keyboard it's only going to allow you to press Z 5 times. You're only going to be able to step back 5 times, but I use an infinite number, so it doesn't necessarily matter how many times I want to go back. I can go back an infinite amount of time. Save actions. So if you want to save all your preferences whenever Maya exits, or save your script editor content when Maya exits, if you didn't have that checked, whenever I shut Maya, this would actually all get deleted and erased. So I'll just go ahead and turn that off there. Load on startup. You can either load your dynamics on startup or choose not to. It doesn't necessarily matter if you have these checked or not. Maya is basically going to load the same way. Applications here for things like if you want to use your certain applications for viewing images and whatnot, you can go ahead and set these as well. So let's go ahead and just hit cancel here. Close our script editor here. Bring back our one window back over here. Okay. Your attribute editor is going to pertain to attributes of a selected object, so let's just go ahead and click that, which is also a shortcut of hitting Control A on your keyboard. So if you have something selected, go ahead and close that and hit Control A. It's going to bring up the same menu here. Your outliner, which is going to allow you to organize and rename objects very quickly. So P-sphere, let's just say double click on it and hit test, hit enter. It's going to rename that object as test, as you can see here. Okay. Your paint effects, which are basically painting inside of Maya, is probably a good general way of describing that. Your UV texture editor, which is going to pertain to texturing your model. Play blast, this is going to work in conjunction with animation. Arrangement, which is how you want your UI to be laid out, which is also in your selected layouts here. And you can change whatever way that you want. So say you want one single perspective view, you can simply just have one single perspective view, or if you want a 4 view. Perspective and outliner, like I said, they're all over here as well. So let's just jump back here to our 4 view. Okay. Save current layout. So you can have a custom layout inside of Maya if you want, and save that layout, and then every time that you open Maya, you will then have that custom layout loaded, similar to what ZBrush does. Frame in all views, and you can see where it's, minimize your application. We'll go ahead and bring that back up. Okay. Raise application windows. It'll just basically bring that application window back up here. Okay, so let's go ahead and close our settings and preferences menu here. Your tool settings, like I said, which are going to contain tools that you want to have selected, as you can see here. Okay, you can also simply double click on them. Let me go ahead and try to get that back in there, and it'll dock. You can turn that on and off. Okay. Your marking menu editor, which if you want to take a look at it, this is going to be able to sort of add shortcuts on your keyboard and stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and frame back in on the object there simply by hitting F on my keyboard. It'll allow you to edit things like this, which I'm simply just holding down Control and right clicking, or say holding down Control and Shift, which will bring up the Pro workspace, which is not something I tend to work that way. Your shelf editor is basically, like I said, just editing your shelf. Your panel editor is going to allow you to edit your panels inside of Maya, which is your layouts and stuff. Your plugin manager is going to allow you to turn plugins inside of Maya on and off. So whether you want to load objects or certain new plugins that you buy, this is actually how you would go ahead and turn those plugins on and off. Okay, let's go ahead and close all that stuff, and we'll call it an end for this lesson, and then in the next lesson we'll come back and continue to work. and learn Maya. So come on back.